Hello, it's week 6, and here we are again. I am going to do the usual, talk to you about the housekeeping things, and then we'll talk about, there's only 3 chapters this week, so it's a smaller amount of material this week. Then I'll let y'all go. Hopefully this one will be shorter than the last ones have been. We've covered a lot of material in the last few weeks. So I will begin by saying I am almost done with the tests. This is Sunday morning, and I will finish those this afternoon. And your grades will be posted on those. Then I have another class, as you know, and they took a test last Tuesday, and I'll be grading their tests. And then I will start on your article analyses. So please be patient. One of the things about compacting what would normally be a 16-week class into 8 weeks causes this problem usually. And you all are a much larger class than we've had in this cohort. They increased our numbers, so there are 32 of you, and in the past I've had somewhere between 25 was the cap, but we always lose a few to attrition. So please just be patient with me. I will get your things graded. All of you all are doing fine. When you turn in work, you're doing fine. I have some of you all that aren't turning in some of your work, so you might want to think about that. And I still have a number of y'all being late. And, you know, so I know y'all get ticked off with me when I say, no, you ask me if I accept it. We'll accept it late. But when you just send it, there, you know, a few of you this past week with that. And it's a case of if you were going to turn in your work late at your job, all right, you wouldn't just say, here's my work late. You know, you don't do that. It's a case of being more professional about taking responsibility for doing late work and having a good reason for it being late. And I've not turned down any of them. Some of the times in the past, not with you all, but I've had some excuses that were not, you know, it's like, no, not accepting it. Sorry. So, but you all have not done that. Thank you. I think on this test, most of y'all are doing pretty well. Some of y'all missed the mark on a couple of things, which you'll see when you get the test back. But right now, the grades are looking really good on the test. So some of y'all left some blank. So, of course, you lose 5 points per one, so you do. The next test will go up this Thursday, and it will be due by Sunday. Then the last test will go up the following Thursday because we're short weeks in there. It is a shorter test. There are only 10 questions on it. So I think that's it. And then your last article analysis isn't due until the last day, the day after the last day of class, which is supposed to be October 8th. But so I think that's it. I think most of y'all are getting pretty much of this. Oh, I just saw my form that I use for your forum posts. I will catch up on those too. Goodness. I'm sorry, it's just been, you know, and I'm the assistant chair and had to do the schedule in the middle of that. And so I got behind, and now I'll never get caught up. I will. I'm teasing. So, okay, these 3 chapters have to do with media effects, and what media effects deal with is the use of media and what are the effects of that. And of course, that's a huge topic in today's day and time because of how much we use media. And in fact, you'll see that I'll ask some forum questions and test questions about how much do you personally use media. You know, I've gotten an answer or two saying, well, I don't want to tell you that. You know, it's like, you don't have to do it in the forum, but if I ask it on test, I'm not telling anybody what you have to say. But I was kind of like, oh, really? It's like, I asked the questions to see if you're getting the theory and can apply it to a real world situation. So anyway, I was a little tangent there, sorry. Anyway, with the media effects, we talk about what happens, and this is where when you look at the textbook, you'll see this about is the media message like a magic bullet? It's a direct hit of the media on people. Selective exposure. We selectively choose what we want to watch or use media for. And then the two-step flow of information comes from media, which means that the opinion leaders get the message, and then the opinion leaders pass that message on through media. And that's a very common model that we see in media studies. And then the revised two-step flow is just that they used to just say it was only to small groups of people that the messages went. Now they say, no, it's mass audiences. Well, of course it's mass audiences if you're talking about media and how media affects people. Powerful effects media, which started to look especially at how violence in the media affects. And there's we'll talk about the cultivation theory here in a minute or two that has to do with that theory, that model. Excitation transfer is like that the media has the ability to stir up feelings, power to produce psychological arousal in the brain. So, yeah. So, and then Bandura's social learning theory, which we talked about. Social learning theory a little bit early on, but what social learning theory has to talk about is how media grabs the attention of the audience, and then the audience retains. So retention retains what they hear, see, experience, and then the motivation to use that. So that's the opening part there to the media effects. I go through those models because those models affect how media does affect society. Okay, the chapter 28 is uses and gratification theory, and this is Eli. They put his whole name, Eli Katz's theory. They used to tie Katz and Kahn to it, but now I see that they just mention Katz, K-A-T-Z. But there's some good examples that they use to show how this theory works. Quite simply, it refers to how do you use media and what gratification do you get out of that. That's why it's called the uses and gratification theory. It's a no-brainer. Okay. We use media for all different sorts of purposes. You have your own purposes. If I pick up my phone and I say, okay, I'm going to look at my Facebook page here, or I'm going to answer this email that Bianca sent me earlier. All right. So, what are we going to do with this? So I have some uses for it, and then I have some gratification. All right. That I get, oh, look, I put up a picture of my kitty this morning and people are liking that because he was into the catnip. So, but what sorts of gratification do we get? And you're finding more and more. I don't have an iPhone, I've got an Android, but I noticed that now on the iPhones that you can like somebody's text or love somebody's text. I'm like, okay, that's a little much for me. It's like, I'm not doing that. But then we've gotten into this whole thing that's a gratifying factor of media, that we can get a message out there through media, and then we get some gratification because we put that out there. Now, actual media leaders, all right, they will hope you're using the media for whatever gratification they're aiming for. If it's a sitcom, are you amused by it? Do you find it humorous? That would be the gratification aspect that the media would get from that, but you would get the gratification effect of your being amused by it. We talk in terms about a uniform effects model, so what types of effects do different types of media have. So if TV has special effects, this is back to that magic bullet, or they also call it the hypodermic needle model of mass comm. What sorts of things do people use? What sort of effect are people looking for? And you're going to seek to gratify your own needs, all right? So when you talk about the straight line effect of media, that's a specific effect on a behavior that is predicted from the media alone, and then they go for that. So that's what they do their media to try and meet that need. So, media compete for your attention and time. That's a no-brainer for you too. I'm positive. Media affect different people differently. Duh. And then the last section, well, not quite the last section. Katz talks about that people can accurately report their media use and their motivation for using that media. So, which you probably could, and I'll ask you to do that. Tell me how you use media. All right. And then there's they give you a typology of how people use media for use or for gratification. And these are things: do you use it to pass time? Do you use it for companionship? Do you use it for escape? Do you use it for enjoyment, for social interaction? Got that sun in my eye again today, sorry. Do you use it for relaxation? Do you use it for information? Do you use it to be excited, for excitement? What do you use media for? So if you look at that, right, then you can, that list, it's Rubin's list, but it seems to fit this theory well about what we use media for. One last thing about media effects, and that's a concept called parasocial relationships. And this is where the title of the things of this area says parasocial relationships, using media to have a fantasy friend. This is where you think, different use of the word fantasy than when we talked about fantasy theme analysis. This is where you think you have a relationship with some TV character or some actor or actress or some singer, or from someone who you know through the media, right? Not through that you really know them, but you feel like you have a relationship with them. It's an example, and I don't know if it's still in this chapter, and I've left my book at home because I'm grading at home, but about Justin Bieber, about how, all these people think they have a relationship with him. Oh, I'm going to marry him. It's like, okay, no, you're not. This is a parasocial relationship. So, and I'll ask you a form question about that, or a test question that says, who do you know? It might be yourself that has a parasocial relationship with someone. The critique of this chapter is just that it's heavy on description and light on prediction. It's like, okay, so we can't predict what people are going to use media for. That's all that says. Okay, and chapter 29 is the cultivation theory of George Gerbner. This theory says that because we're so connected to media, and we see a lot of media, heavy television viewers especially, and can be movie viewers, they develop an exaggerated belief in the mean and scary world. And that's because we see so much violence on TV, according to Gerbner. If I ask you the question that they open this chapter with is, what are the odds that you'll be involved in some kind of violent act within the next 7 days? Okay, so if you sit and think about that, all right, well, probably what you'll think about are things that you've heard through the media. I had the news on this morning. I listened to the Charlotte media up here, and they were talking about a club, I think it was down in Rock Hill, where somebody went in and started shooting and killed 2 people, seriously injured 9 people. It's like, so am I afraid to go places? We hear one of the big ones that people are pointing out with this cultivation theory right now are all the mass shootings, especially in school situations. So, and what people are doing because of that. And so what Gerbner would said was that you would begin to develop this belief that something bad was going to happen to you. And Gerbner believed that TV did shape our, TV played a dominant force in shaping modern society, is what Gerbner said. Gerbner believed that TV's power came from the symbolic content of real life drama shows, and that ones that were shown hour after hour, week after week. All right, so he wasn't so much paying attention to news stories, which we pay more attention to now when we talk about the cultivation theory. He was talking more about shows that had the violence in it. So what this chapter looks at then is, how does violence in the media affect the people, the consumers of the media? Is it dramatic violence? Do we know that it's fake? Do we pay attention to that it's not, made real world, that it's man-made? I have written on a couple of things that some of you all did early in the first test, where you gave examples of TV examples. That's an example right there of the cultivation theory. When you give me an example that is a TV show example to exemplify communication theory, right there would say, okay, what we're paying attention to on TV we think is real. And I accepted those, but you'll have seen that I wrote, don't use TV shows or fictional things for examples for this. I want you to apply it to real world. All right. That's cultivation theory right there. And there were a few of you all that have done that. And so you know who you are, and you recall my comment, don't use fictional things. The whole thing about the violence part of that just says that we think that there's more violence in the world because of what we see in fictional TV shows. All right, and that violence is bad, but it's not quite as bad as we think it is. Excuse me, my throat is helps. Got a little tickle in there. There's a good discussion in this chapter about heavy viewers. And are you a heavy viewer, or are you a light viewer? I know there are a couple of you all that say that you don't watch any TV at all. All right, and then there are some of you all that will be heavy viewers. So they give you some definitions of heavy viewer, at least 4 hours per day. I don't know about you. I don't have 4 hours per day to watch it. Although I turn on the news in the morning, and then in the evening when I go home, and I usually watch one show after the news. So I probably do 4 hours a day. By those standards, I'd be a heavy viewer, but I'm not, because I don't watch it all the time. But I'm bad about watching Investigative Discovery Channel, so that also would help me create a mean world syndrome in my head, if you know anything about Investigative Discovery Channel. So when we watch these shows, what Gerbner would say is that minds are plowed by television. Right, and so what happens is that we grow. So when you plow the field, you grow something, and what we're growing with the violence that's there are fearful thoughts about what can happen in this world. There are some other things here about mainstreaming and resonance. Mainstreaming is the process that shapes groups of viewers whose socioeconomic and educational backgrounds would otherwise align them with one position or another, and they mention about being conservative or liberal political questions, but it could be anything. And then resonances, that's the mechanism that affects heavy viewers who have already been victims of violence. So what that means is if you have been a victim of violence and you see a similar violence on a TV show, all right, that will resonate with you. That will make sense to you. You will feel that more than someone who has not been through that crime situation. And those are important aspects of Gerbner's theory because he says that's one of the things that makes people respond more heavily to that message. There's been some more recent research on cultivation analysis simply because this was done 35 years ago and 35 years ago, and it's media's changed since then. You know, we didn't walk around with little computers in our hands when we were 35 years ago. I had a bag phone, but that was even less than 35 years ago. That's how we started it, with them bag phones. The major findings about cultivation theory or cultivation analysis is the differential. They refer to it as cultivation differential, and that's the difference in the percentage giving the television answer. All right, within what's the percentage that people within the light group or the heavy group are going to give the same answer? Okay, so that's the differential. What's going to happen there? So, you know, who's going to say you have a chance of being involved with violence more? Who's going to have a fear of walking at night more? Who's going to have a perceived activity of the police more? Heavy viewers or light viewers? You know, that's a no-brainer. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you could be a heavy viewer and not think that. And then general mistrust of people is another one that comes up there. The biggest one-liner for the Gerbner cultivation theory is mean world syndrome. Okay? Do you believe we live in a mean world? All right. Gerbner says that we've become cynical about this. And so what we have is a general mistrust of others. And so therefore we think this is a mean world. All right. Especially heavy viewers will. And then they get into meta-analysis here too. You know, we talked about meta-communication early on. But meta-analysis means that you do an analysis of the analysis. So, which is what Gerbner did. So, the critique of this is that there has never been real proof that violence on TV causes violence. There has been research that shows that people are attuned to the violence, and so that's where this cultivation theory comes in. All right, there have been people that say that watching too much violence will cause you to be violent, but there's never been you know, an objective study, not an interpretive one. There's plenty of interpretive studies out there that deal with this, but no objective one that has absolute confirmation of a hypothesis that TV violence causes people to be more violent. So it's a fascinating one to think about, especially if you are a heavy viewer, and I would suggest that you do look at that aspect of your life. Okay, and the last chapter, chapter 30, for this week is, I tried to move during, I was like, okay, is the agenda setting theory of media. All right, there are lots of other types of agenda setting theory, but when we talk about it in the field of communication, we talk mostly about it being a media theory. And this is McCombs and Shaw, and basically the bottom line is that the original agenda in the media area was that media would not tell you what to think, but they would tell you what to think about. All right, and so that, you know, we're finding more and more with this whole issue of, oh, that's fake news, and that's biased news, and all those kinds of things. We're finding more and more people saying that is no longer true about agenda setting theory. That there are, especially broadcasters, who are telling you what they want you to think, not just what to think about. So The reason they said that originally, by the way, was because it was thought to be, a non-biased thing that newscasters especially should do, that they should not show bias or prejudice in a story. We are finding more and more that we do hear reporters and folks that do say, okay, this is how I want you to think. Right? So the agenda setting hypothesis then is that mass media does have the ability to transfer the salience, that's SALIENCE, salience of issues on their news agenda and to the public agenda. Now, what saliency means, all right, what salience means is, short answer, it stands out. All right, so the idea is to make that issue stand out. So that's what McCombs and Shaw thought of the agenda setting theory, that we pay attention to things that the media brings out there and because they have made it salient to us, made it stand out to us. All right. And when it was brought about, it was a theory that needed being brought out because more and more media was becoming more and more popular. And so they needed to look at how that affected people's opinions and thoughts and votes and buying products and that kind of thing. The media agenda and the public agenda are often usually what textbook refers to as a close match. The media agenda was that the pattern of news coverage, especially over print media, print media these days is almost all online. We don't see much paper newspapers. We do see them, but they're not as common as people reading the news online or watching it through some form of mass media. But one of the things that you could tell when it was printed was how important the story was, how salient the story was by how long the story was. How many pages did it go into an inside page? Now we talk about, is it longer than a 20-second soundbite in a news story on television? All right. So that you begin to think about how much do we pay attention to this topic because it's in the news all the time, and how much do we miss paying attention to because it's not covered in the news in any detail or not covered at all. So that would be part of the agenda setting issue. Oops, sorry. For some reason I got a scratchy throat this morning. How they do most of their studies for this, by the way, is by doing public opinion surveys. So to find out if the mass media's agenda is meeting the public agenda, they do surveys. You hear it all the time in a poll, all right? So that's how they do it. That's where they get the information from. They ask people. So, then you have to say, well, what causes what? Does the media cause that or does something else? And so what McCombs and Shaw said that the media agenda, if we look in the voting area, the media agenda becomes the voters' agenda, all right? But then later on, other theorists come along and say, no, the voters' agenda sets the media's agenda. And in my opinion, that's a toss-up. It's a little bit of both. So, if you start paying attention to that, especially we have a national election coming up next year, and we're seeing a lot in the news about, especially this week, with folks running and the Joe Biden and his son issue and those kind of things. And I haven't paid a whole lot of attention yet, but I plan to. So is that media is going to set my agenda to pay more attention to that? Right? Or what's up with this? So anyway, who's most affected by the media's agenda? Well, basically, what McCombs and Shaw did was they turned back to Katz's theory about the uses and gratification. What are you going to watch? I have no doubt that some of you all watch a specific um, network, whatever, that many people think is more liberal. And I have no doubt that I have some of you all that watch a network that many people think is very conservative, right? So what do? It's like, who's most effective? Well, you're going to choose what best suits your thought processes, your opinions, your feelings, your beliefs, all right? And what McCombs and Shaw would say is that's typical because the media is out there setting the agenda. So you choose the media that's setting the agenda that stands out, that's salient for you. Does that make sense? I hope. Since I can't get an answer, y'all can email me later if that didn't make sense. One of the other issues about agenda setting is whether or not the media can raise the level of curiosity for the viewers or for the people that are consuming that message. So framing comes into play here. And what framing does is that it frames the message so that people pay attention to the message that they have framed into this. All right, so that's basically the idea of framing is where you select a restricted number of thematically related attributes for inclusion in that story. And that's where the agenda setters came in. They choose what goes to say. Now, they used to ask, who are the agenda setters? Used to be the the people who ran the TV station or the radio station. These days, in my personal opinion, it's more the public that becomes the agenda setter for certain networks, radio stations, and so forth. So the two levels of agenda setting are to create the salience, make it stand out, and then to transfer that salience into a dominant set of attributes that people pay attention to. So you get it out there and then you build it into the dominant thing that people are paying attention to. And that's why some of you choose Fox News and some of you choose CNN, because they frame it like you want it, believe it, feel it, etc. So and again, just keep in mind that supposedly media doesn't tell us what to think, right? But what to think about. But now we don't say that 100%. It's not just what to think, it's also what to think about. But you'll note that they added that in there, not just what to think, because nowadays we do get told what to think. We hear it in the media all the time. One of the biggest issues of agenda setting is the behavioral effect of the media and agenda setting and the media's agenda. There's a concept called media malady effect, and that's the negative economic headlines and stories that depress consumer sentiment, right, and leading economic indicators, meaning that when you hear something's wrong with the economy, right, that when media covers that, then that sets the agenda for what you do. Like, you may hear this, like, well, I'm not going to go buy a new car now because, look, the bottom's going to fall out and we're going to be back in another recession, which is what we're hearing somewhat now in the media recently. So again, who sets the agenda for the agenda setters? All right, news editors usually are the first people, gatekeepers of the material, especially in the area of political dialogue. So the editors choose that. Basically with that, you think about the media that you choose. All right, I'm an NPR listener in the car, and I'm not a don't consider myself to be what I hate the labels because they're just so horrible, but you know what people would label liberal, which most people that listen to NPR get labeled that. I'm very much middle of the road. All right. I just don't like the new music of today. So I'm an oldie. I'm, 67 years old. I'll be 68 in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's like, I like the oldies. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll listen to this instead. But, I could just as soon listen to another talk show and get just as much out of it. So that's how middle of the road I am. But it's clear, that there are different agendas that the news editors on NPR choose. All right. I don't have a problem with that, so I listen to it. If I had a problem with that, guess what? I wouldn't listen to it. And that's it. We make our choices sometimes based on what the agenda setters have done with the material that they're choosing to put out there. And the ethical critique of this one deal somewhat with what are called communitarian ethics, about that media has a moral responsibility to promote community, to promote mutuality and persons and relationships to each other, and to take care of each other, that people would live for both themselves and for others, which some folks, by the way, call that a Christian communitarian ethics, and because of the teachings of John Locke and other Christian theorists. But I don't necessarily think that most people think of that so much as a Christian theology approach to things. I mean, they don't label it as that, is what I'm saying. All right. They say, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm supposed to love my neighbor, all right, and take care of my neighbor. All right. And so that we get some of that message out there. So that's the ethical reflection. To be quite honest, I don't know why they put that here. I don't see that ethical reflection really fits here. And I think that, that when we're talking about how media pays attention to things, yeah, we do hear some about, you need to be taking care of each other. And some of the news stories address that. But the critique of this chapter is that it's too limited. It's too limited of a theory. So anyway, those are the chapters for this week. I hope y'all have a great week and I get that sun out of my eyes. And again, watch for test grades to go up later this afternoon. I'm headed to church, and then I'll go home and grade. And maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm on question 15, so that means I got 5 more, but I've got 32 of you times 5 to read. So anyway, I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you all next week. And don't forget, test goes up on Thursday, comes down on, is due on Sunday, so at 5. Have a great week. Bye.